I'm Christopher Plummer. I created and run the sound design programs at Michigan Technological University on the shores of Lake Superior in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan in the United States. I do regional theater design, operas, theater, plays, musicals. I also do broadcast sound occasionally for truck races and athletics events. I have done post-production mixing for documentary films for PBS and film festivals. And I do a lot of live sound work as well as a lot of studio recording and live classical recording. So a lot of very different activities that keep me alive, keep me enjoying my job. Today we're going to talk about the sound design specifically in theater in the United States, the different jobs that are available, and the process of how all those jobs work together, how they work with others, how they collaborate for the theatrical creative team. And we're going to start off with the jobs in musical theater, and then we'll talk about jobs in non-musical theater or theater that's not using microphones. Then we'll talk about the process and how all these jobs interact, how they work, what the timelines are, and how we work creatively and collaboratively with others. So that's the plan for today. We're going to start with the jobs and positions and the process for musical theater. In musical theater, we generally, even in smaller theaters, you'll have at least 3 positions. You'll have a sound designer, you'll have an A1, and an A2. Each of these positions has different roles to play and different ways to support it. They also have different timelines and different involvement in the production. And then as productions get larger, we'll add in some other jobs to these 3 sort of core positions. So the designer is in charge of everything. Anything having to do with the sound, buck stops there, right? They're going to work with the producer, they're going to work with the director, they're going to work with the musical director to develop the show, to make sure that everything sounds great. And that could be the sound effects, it could be the mix, it could be every aspect of the sound. So they're going to work with the A1. The A1's going to be in the audience, behind the mixer, listening to the show and executing the sound design every night. They are the main person in charge of making sure that the artistic vision of the show is maintained throughout the entire run of the show. They're the person that listens to the show with the audience, making sure that it's just right. And they're going to be working with the console, getting the balances right, listening every night, making adjustments if somebody's sick, if there's something that needs to be done to keep the sound the way it was designed to be. Now, note I'm saying that they need to keep the sound the way it was designed to be. They're really in charge of making sure that the designer's vision comes to life. They're not the person who decides how the mix should sound. But as a sound designer, when I work with a mixer, I definitely want somebody who's got good ears, who has a sense of how to make things sound certain ways, so that I can really have an artistic decision with them rather than a technical discussion with them. So I can talk to them about, hey, the balance is off this way, whether it's a little muddy, or I just need the vocals out a little bit more, or I'm missing, the middle part of the backup singers, or whatever it is. I can talk to them in those sort of terms, and we can get on the same page artistically, rather than too much time giving them technical notes in terms of, turn the backup alto up 3 dB. Because if I do that, and sometimes that's the language that's most efficient, but often if I do that as a designer working with my A1, that's going to, that limits their empowerment, right? Because it's telling them this specific thing, but that specific thing's maybe not going to be 3 dB every night. It might be 1.5, it might be 4. I need them to hear and understand and be able to repeat the effect I want on the audience every night, not paint by numbers, right? So the mixers out front of house, they're also sort of the head of the sound crew for the production. And in a smaller production, that sound crew is just going to be an A2. So the A2 is going to be backstage. They're going to be in charge of making sure that all the wireless mics are working, that they're mounted properly, that we can't see them, that they're not coming loose. Sometimes the A2 plays sound effects. Sometimes the sound effects are played by the A1. Sometimes you have somebody dedicated to just playing the sound effects. It all depends on the production and how many sound effects cues are there, and what's the best way to program that in. Who's got time to do that is really the fundamental question there. So backstage, it's a lot of wireless mic management. One of the things that often gets overlooked that can be super helpful, particularly if you have a skilled A2, is making sure that they have headphones, making sure that they can patch in and listen to the different mics, because then the A1, if there's a problem on stage, they can just notify the A2, and the A2 can do a lot of that troubleshooting while the A1 continues to do the mix and keep the show sounding good, and sort of does whatever stopgap measures are needed, whether it's bringing up a second mic. Sometimes we'll double mic actors, and that's not because we're doing them in stereo or something. It's just that we have two mics on them, and if one of them fails, we can use the other mic. Or if it's filling in with area mics or whatever it is that the mixer is doing to keep the show going, to make it sound good, they're going to have to do a lot of work on that side so that the audience doesn't notice there's a problem, while the A2 can troubleshoot and find out what's wrong and can grab that actor when they come off stage and turn the pack back on, or fix a loose connection, or swap out equipment if that's what's needed. So you've got the A1 mixer, front of house, out there with the audience. Front of house is usually what we sound people refer to as the mixer area. Front of house for other theater people often means the ushers and the box office and a whole different kind of thing. So that can sometimes cause confusion, that there are two different uses for the term front of house. And then the A2 is backstage working with the wireless mics. Sometimes that also means, during set changes, they might be swapping speakers or doing other special effects needs backstage. As we get larger shows, we'll actually increase who's working. We might add a second sound person backstage. Often, if we have additional crew needs backstage, that can sometimes what we'll do is, instead of adding sound crew, we'll partner with the deck electrician. So during scene changes, there's often an electrician backstage who's plugging and unplugging practicals and making sure whatever lighting changes need to happen during the show happen. And sometimes we can partner with them. Often, if there's a wagon going out and it's got speakers in it, it's got lights on it, depending on the theater, there's a good chance that you'll be able to partner with the deck electrician, and they can plug in the light and plug in the speaker, because you can just put the plugs right next to each other and it's a lot smoother. As we expand, we'll have to figure out whether we're going into a theater where there's already a house system. They do, similar shows all the time, and so we're not, we're adding maybe a couple of effects speakers, we're organizing the mics, but we're basically using the house sound system that's already installed, that's used for every show, and then we don't have a lot of load-in, we don't have a lot of troubleshooting. We have one of the things that we are responsible for is comm systems on productions. Those can get quite complicated, and there is a lot of shuffling of comm between technical rehearsals, previews, shows. And you sometimes have to pull the comm in and out because all the tech tables go away for the preview, but then we have some more tech rehearsals, and and if you're working with a rep situation, then there's all kinds of other changeovers to happen. And so as we look at how much troubleshooting might have to happen, we look at how much installation time there is. We often push for a production audio position. Some people call it a production sound engineer. Some people call it production audio. Some people call it an audio supervisor or a sound supervisor. Often if they're called a sound supervisor or audio supervisor, they're sort of the full-time sound person for the regional theater. It's very common in regional theater to have a sound supervisor who maybe designs a couple of shows and then supervises all the sound systems for all the shows and all the load-ins and those sorts of things. And they're the person to talk to as a sound designer if you're coming in to do a show and say, well, what other speakers do you have, or how many mics do you have, or can we swap this out? What can we get? Particularly if you're looking at, well, what do the local rental companies have, because we need some extra equipment. There are folks that can be a really valuable resource for a sound designer, knowing the particulars of that location and that venue. So this production audio position, production sound engineer, will take over a lot of the system installation. So they will build the racks, set up the speakers, get everything prepped for installation. They'll run the installation. They'll be there through tuning. They'll do an initial test of the sound system. So the thing is, before you get into tuning, you want to make sure that everything works. So the production sound engineer is the person who's going to make sure that the system is really ready for tuning and that you're not wasting tuning time doing troubleshooting or basic, does the system work? As you work on that, they're going to move into a support position more and more. But this really allows you during tech rehearsals, if there's a comm issue, if there's some sort of system issue, the A1, who's supposed to be mixing the show, doesn't have to leave that position. They can stay, they can mix the show, and the production sound engineer can solve problems. And since they're the person that supervised the installation, they know, they ought to know how to solve those problems. They're going to have the experience with the cabling, with the with any sort of things that had to change when the design got to the actual theater and they found out that, oh, this cable was 10 feet too short. And here's what we did to solve that problem. So that's a really valuable position. One of the things that it sometimes gets confused with is an assistant or associate designer. So assistants and associates, the basic difference between assistants and associates generally is that an associate could talk for the sound designer. An associate can be can represent the sound designer in a design meeting, where an assistant can take notes during a meeting, but they wouldn't really solve a problem in a meeting, whereas an associate would. So the associate is the representative of the designer, and the assistant is the assistant to the designer, and just does what the designer wants them to do. So what does an assistant or associate do? Well, the basic rule is they do whatever the designer doesn't want to do, right? And if you want to be a really valuable assistant or associate, you find out the jobs that your designer likes the least, and those are the ones that you get really good at, right? And then your designer continues to hire you. And this is a key thing, that the designer often, the designer does hire the associate and assistant designers, whereas the A1, A2, the crew, the designer probably has some input in that, particularly with companies that the designer has a long-term relationship with, but often those are hired by the production manager. They're hired by somebody else, whereas the assistant or the associate works for the designer, is hired by the designer, usually. But definitely the designer has way more input on the assistant and the associate, who the assistant or the associate is. So those two positions, which is, it's usually one, it's an either or, and they're just taking some of the load off the designer and making it more achievable to get everything done in the amount of time that it wants to get done in, and allowing the designer to take on more shows, right? So they often, on the musical, they'll either be do a lot of the paperwork, the design, the drafting. So the designer will sketch out the system, hand it to the assistant to flesh out in terms of drafting and making the paperwork and making the labels and making sure everything's ready to go when we get into the shop. Or they may be much more sort of cue focused. So there are some designers that really love musicals, love the mix, love the sound system design, but are less enthused about building all the cues, programming QLab, that sort of thing. And so there are folks that specialize more in that area, that they're really good at programming the QLab and creating the sound effects and getting those layered into musicals. And some musicals, don't really have very many sound effects. A lot of it, the score is there, the music's there, the singers are there. You have a few sound effects, not a big deal. Other musicals have lots of sound effects, say something like Into the Woods. And so there you may really, a musical sound designer may want, in particular, an assistant that's going to do a lot of work building sound cues. Particularly if there's significant need for recording sound effects that go with actors or actions on stage, sort of thing, that need to be much tighter in terms of we're not just going to be able to pull that sound effect and use something generic. We're going to have to get something super specific, which is going to take more time. So non-musicals, in many ways, it's being more and more difficult to separate out musicals from shows without singing and dancing, in that many plays that are not musicals are using wireless mics. So if you are using microphones, whether it's a musical or not, you're going to need an A1, you're going to need an A2 backstage. The structure is not going to be too terribly different, although you probably have a lot more sound cues. One of the things, now if you're not using mics, then the arrangements get quite a bit different. So you've got your board op or your playback operator, QLab operator, however that description is made for the specific theater that you're working in. And then you'll have, you may have some crew assistance on that. Might just be working with a combined electrics crew that is both lighting and sound, and you're using them for whatever needs that you have. If that's moving a speaker backstage, if it's placing a microphone for a special effect, an offstage voice, or that point at the show where an actor actually has a mic, a working mic prop on stage, or plugging the telephone in, unplugging the telephone so that it actually rings on stage. That you're actually just working with the electric screw to make that happen. And that's where it's really important to make sure that you make friends and that you work well with others, because you're often going to need some favors, and it's going to make your life so much easier if that's a mutual supportive relationship rather than an argument and a fight over resources. So the other thing that you might have on a larger show is a programmer. So you may have somebody running QLab and somebody who's specializes in programming the QLab. Often that might be an assistant designer or an associate designer, but there is this difference between folks that work for the designer and production people that are associated with the venue or the production. And sometimes, especially in larger productions, that demarcation becomes really important, because if you're not on a union contract with the venue or the production, you may not be allowed to touch the equipment. And so obviously you're not going to be programming it. You're going to be describing what you need to have happen, supplying the files. Somebody else is going to program it. But in the most part, especially in regional theater, you're going to be the designer, you're going to be the programmer, and then you'll have an operator. Process as a sound designer starts with, contract negotiations, getting a job, searching those things down, making connections, networking, particularly networking with directors. You really want to have good relationships with a lot of directors, because those are the folks that are going to say, hey, I want to work with this person. But sometimes it's also relationships with production managers. So, somebody had to pull out of a job and they have their short list of people that they're going to call and say, hey, are you free? Once you move into having the job, it's really going to be focused in on reading that play, getting your initial responses to it. What is my first, most visceral kind of reaction to this? Why do I like this? Why do I enjoy it? What is it that grabs my attention? Because I want to make sure as a designer that I don't undermine that later as I find other interesting things about the story, right? I want to add depth to it. I want to add some of that subtext. I want to get richer sort of experience for folks who are experiencing the live production, but I don't want to lose what I found beautiful and engaging with that first read, right? I want to make sure that that comes through, and I don't want to forget it. So we're going to focus on that. And then we're going to go and read and explore and research. I'm going to have a meeting with the director. I'm going to be prepared to bring my own things there, but I'm also going to have a light touch there in case the director is, sometimes directors have a concept about the show that is very much in keeping with what you were thinking. Sometimes they're going to push some boundaries, particularly if it's a public domain show. If it's Shakespeare, they have some take on it that they really want to pursue. You need to be ready for that to kind of change the direction that you're going. But generally, if there isn't a shifting in time period or something very different about the production, that discussion's going to really revolve around what you saw and where you want to go with it and which things connect to sound to you and which don't. And the director will probably have a few ideas here and there, but really they're looking for you to take their few ideas and their overarching view about what the show is and what's important about doing the show and making that work in the world of sound. And often, even if they come to you with, hey, I've got all of these ideas for sound, they really, really want you to take ownership of that and to make it all gel and to make it all go together. And to really partner with them as a creative team. So once we got the ball rolling there with initial reads, with initial discussions, and it may be at this point that you even see sketches and designs from particularly sets and costumes. Often sets and costumes are hired in a little bit ahead of schedule in terms of lighting and sound. We generally are a little bit more reactive in many circumstances, not all. We'll get to some particular situations in which sound actually can lead the whole process, actually. But often we get hired after the set designer, and so there's already some stuff there, and that is going to be inspiration for you. It's going to be things that you're going to look at those and you'll be like, oh, I hear that, or oh, that really needs to go in this direction looking at that costume, right? And as we go through this, I'm going to, read that play. I'm going to research the time period, the psychological issues at play, the anything that really connects to me for why we're doing this show, right? And particularly if it's, look at the time period, look at musical influences that are really important there. Really get a feeling for the rhythm, the tempo, the melodies at play that even if I'm not composing for it, that are going to suffuse this play. And then as I continue to play with that and start to put together ideas and kind of think conceptually about, well, this is what it's really about, and getting sort of an overarching thing, starting to dive down into those moments of saying, okay, so I got this idea and I kind of played around sound. Where exactly does this fit? How does it fit in a specific moment? How does it help connect specific relationships in the play? How can I make this sound something that can interact with other design elements, with the actors? How can I really make it an integral part of the show, not just something that plays alongside the show? Right? And that's where you get into this, the collaboration that you have with the director and what your relationship is with rehearsal. There's a wide variety of relationships that sound designers have with rehearsal. Some designers, you just, you look at your contract, you look at how much you're getting paid, and you say, hey, I'm going to be there for first tech. I'm going to give you this many tech rehearsals. We'll have this many meetings before tech so that we can really map it out. But you're not going to be deeply involved with the production process because you can't afford to. Right? On other shows, and some designers are really well known for being in the rehearsal hall, playing with the actors, coming up with ideas, and sort of improv with the actors and the sound all together. And that happens a lot in devised theater. There's certain acting companies that really see the sound designer as part of the ensemble, or even part of the sort of writing team for shows. And so that's a key position where you're going to have a lot more influence in and need to be in the rehearsal space with the actors. Sort of in between these two ends of the continuum, I'm here just for tech, and I am a full-on member of the cast in terms of the collaborative rehearsal process, is every other show, the majority of shows, where you're going to need to look at the script and talk to the director about what are our priorities here. Are there moments in this show where we need there to be some extra rehearsal time with the sound design or composition and what's going on in the rehearsal hall? In particular, if there's a dance number, if there's other things that are really going to be tightly choreographed to the music that you're composing or your sound design, then those are probably going to need to be in rehearsal a little bit earlier so that the actors can get comfortable with them, so that the blocking and choreography can be done with them. If you're waiting until the last moment with those, then it's just not going to be very good because everybody's not going to be super comfortable with it. So identifying those things where there's going to need to be a tighter interaction with sound and performer is really important. And obviously, the more professional the actors and directors you're working with, the less time folks are going to need. And there are other times where you'll have directors who are just so experimental and trying things and throwing things at the wall that finding a space for yourself to have a little protection from having to create too many cues can be very helpful. Also, you need to know what sort of designer you are and how able you are to be spontaneous in the rehearsal hall. Some folks, you need to have a speed of creation that allows you to be in the rehearsal hall and improvise at the speed that's needed for that sort of work. And a lot of that's prep, right? It may not be that you are all that spontaneous, but if you spend enough time listening and playing and experimenting, you can be ready to be collaborative and improvisational in the rehearsal space because you've laid the groundwork for that. I had a production of Midsummer Night's Dream where we had hundreds of cues throughout the show, but the director wouldn't work with me on setting any of them until we got to tech. We had just 3-4 days of tech, and so I had to be ready to go. And we would get in the space, actors would do something, say enter a door, run across stage, do a thing downstage, and then run off. I would have a stopwatch and would time what the actor just did, and then I would have a few minutes to put together some options for sound for everybody to listen to and decide which one was the go cue. And so, before that rehearsal had started, I had just cut up and had this huge library of sounds that were going to be appropriate for this, with different timings and different arrangements, and then we, just went for it, and it was constantly, okay, here's the next sound, here's the next sound, here's the next sound, and putting it together right in the space. And that, as you get into creating the sounds and your time and how you work, the more you can create in the rehearsal space, the better it's going to be for you. If you have to go back to the studio and fix everything, every time you need a new cue, you need it longer, you need to fade out different, whatever it is, that's going to be a lot of your time, and it's going to eat into your dinner breaks. It's going to eat into your sleep. It's going to eat into your health, right? And so the more you can change things in rehearsal, in tech rehearsals, the better it's going to be for you. Being able to get in there and just use your playback platform as a creative tool, not just, hey, I create things in my DAW and then I play them back in this software. The more you can use your playback software creatively in the moment to make things work, the better you're going to be. The better you're going to be off. It's going to be good for your health. It's going to be good for your socialization with the rest of the creative team. It's not going to be, hey, they're going off to dinner and I'm going to fix all these cues because I have to put them in my DAW and bounce them back out and we're coming back after dinner. You'll actually be, hey, yeah, I fixed all these notes while we were going through the tech rehearsal, right? And so that's where you want to be. And that's going to also give you that ability to quickly change it, have the director hear it, put it back into the space, get the timing right with the actors because you can work that quickly, that fast, right? So that's what you really want to think about, is how can you prepare your life, prepare your libraries, prepare your work process so that you can be creatively present in the moment of rehearsal, fixing things, making things work, and getting it done so that you can have actually a life and outside of the rehearsal. And also be looking for your next position, right? Because you're going to constantly, especially if you're an independent designer, you got to be constantly looking for the next job. So that's the sort of rehearsal, sound cue creation, that creative process there. The other process is how do you get the sound system in place, right? And so you're going to need to set up the system design, and particularly anything that's going to impact the set design really early. And that also goes for microphones that you're going to want to collaborate with the costume designer on. Make sure you're in the same page of who's got hats, who's got glasses, how is this wig going to impact the mic placement. Are there, major changes? They have this hat only in a couple of scenes, and so we have to figure out how that's going to affect the sound and how we're going to handle that, especially if they change wigs. That's a big deal. And make sure you know how the belt packs are going to be hidden. If you're doing a period drama with lots of clothes, that's easier. If you're doing something where there's a lot of movement, where there's going to be fight scenes, where people are going to roll across the floor, that obviously you've got a lot of issues there to solve in terms of keeping people and equipment safe, making sure that it's going to be reliable, and understanding, well, what's, if the belt pack is not hidden in a wig or something, it's going to be on the body. How is this cable going to be hidden, right? And particularly if you're doing Chicago and people are in lingerie, that's going to be a challenge, right? Or it's going to be a discussion about here's what we have in terms of our budget, here's what we have in terms of equipment, here's what we want sound-wise, here are compromises we might have to make, or can the costume designer and I get together and do something creative? What are the possibilities? But you need to have those discussions really early, because later in the process, after things are already built, you're stuck with whatever's there, and that may not go well. And the same thing's true for the set. Is there this elevator that needs to make sound in the set, and how is it going to make sound, right? The scenery probably makes no sound that's appropriate whatsoever. So you need to plan out how that's going to happen. Where are you going to hide a speaker? Can you get it built into the set? Is it a little heater vent? And some things are easy to do later on in the process, and some things, are not. And it also depends on your designer and the idea about what the design is and how clean those lines are. So some things, it's really easy to just say, oh, we'll just put a heater vent in the wall here, and we can put a speaker behind it, and it'll be fine. It'll blend in with the design and everything. Other times, well, it's this clear, unbroken, smooth sheet of cement that we're trying to get this minimalist view of, right? And so putting a speaker in the middle of it is a no-go. So if it's built and painted a certain way, you might be able to shoot sound through it. Although if the paint fills in the holes on the fabric, really it's a very hard surface and the sound just bounces off it, and you won't get that transmission through it. If that's what you're looking for, it's not going to work. And so you're going to have to find some other way to do that, whether that's, a speaker above that's bouncing off of it, or if it's, how close can you get the speaker? Can there be a planter that you put the speaker in? Can you have, something on stage that the speaker goes in if you can't, if that huge long wall has to be an unblemished surface? Come up with ideas, work with your set designer. Often set designers know that speakers want to be, in certain locations to create a reality. And they want to help you with that. And if you talk to them early enough, they often are quite creative and can come up with ways that make things work. If you talk to them too late, though, and stuff's already built, that really limits the ways in which you can come up with creative solutions. And if those design discussions do really highlight the sound and have the sound as an integral part and have your idea of where speakers need to be, sometimes you can really have a great relationship with a scenic designer where that they really design elements into the set that help solve your sound problems, and that's awesome. So then there's the traditional sort of sound design paperwork is due, which is going to be much later, and is largely for installing the sound system, and those due dates don't really take into consideration that sound integrating with the scenic design, right? But this is where we make sure that we know we've got all the equipment that we need to rent or install, or, is it a multi-venue facility that needs to negotiate equipment with other venues within the facility, whatever that is, but gets that design set, or it could be, this is when it has to go out to bid for rental companies, and we get the bids back and we choose the rental company, and then it's going to be built. At this time, your assistant or associate's probably going to go there for the build at the rental company, so it gets all labeled properly and it's all ready to go in, and they are intimately familiar with the equipment that you're getting and how it's all stored and organized and transported, and then they supervise the installation so it goes in nice and smooth and quick, and doesn't blow your labor budget. There's a revision coming out from the United States Institute for Theater Technology and the Theatrical Sound Designers and Composers Association for recommended practices in terms of your sound documentation and how that sound system should be laid out, how the paperwork should look, so that we're working significantly towards standardizing that process so that it's easier to read everybody's paperwork, so that rental shops are all getting the same stuff. So that the certain details that need to be covered are covered, and as folks are learning how to do that, they have some good guidance. That should be up on the website shortly. I've got some examples here. Here you can see the block diagram that's got the wiring and how it all goes together. You're going to have speaker plots that show you where the different speakers go. There's going to be a lot of individual details about that are covered in that system documentation, which is really important for making things go smoothly and for troubleshooting later on. As you get this installed, either your assistant, associate, or that production sound engineer that we talked about previously is going to supervise that whole process, and then be there able to troubleshoot during the production process once you're in rehearsals and folks are tied up, actually listening to the show, making it sound good. And as part of that, one of the things to be really, really on top of is the comm system. The comm system is not our favorite part of the sound system, but it is almost always the sound department's responsibility. And the thing is if comm breaks, everything grinds to a halt, right? If sound cue doesn't work or you're down a speaker or something, you can say, well, we're going to fix that, but, you know, for now, just ignore that these few seats can't hear, or folks can work on lighting cues, or they can work on other things while you fix your sound problem. But if comm is down, pretty much nobody does anything. The whole room stares at you until it's fixed. So make sure comm works. Make sure that you've wiggled all those connections. Make sure that it's good and solid. Make sure that that is not going to draw undue attention to the quality of your work. That is not something you want. So once you've done load-in, the production sound engineer, assistant associate, or the designer, if it's a smaller production, you're not going to have those three positions, it's just going to be you, needs to make sure that everything works. So you're going to go through, make sure that you're getting sound to everywhere, make sure sound's not going weird places, make sure the routing's all good, make sure that every speaker works, every mic works. You're just going to go through and check that you've got signal and that it sounds reasonable, that there aren't polarity reversals, that, you know, everything is on the up and up. So basic, fundamental, does it work, test. So once you've accomplished that, you know that you're ready to go into tuning. So before we get to tech rehearsals, we often like to have 2 quiet times or 1 long quiet time, however it's going to work out in the schedule. But you're going to want one where you go in and you tune the sound system. You make sure that everything's time aligned. You make sure that the frequency response is good. You make sure that everything's working in harmony. You make sure that the routing is balanced between how things get sent to different speakers. You make sure that the SPL on different subsystems is shaded properly so that the focus goes where you want the focus to go, and supporting elements are supporting elements and are not trying to be stars. So that you need to have a couple hours for tuning. It depends on, you know, the size of your system. Could be significant, could be 4 or 5 hours, could just be an hour. It really depends on the complexity of the sound system and how well it did in the operational test before you started tuning, because you do not want to waste your quiet time actually fixing just getting sound. You want to use your quiet time to get good sound. The other quiet time that you're likely to have is cueing time, right? And so now we have a good solid system, and now we're going to play our sound cues. We're going to get some rough levels. We're going to make sure that everything's working that way. We're going to make sure that however we've set up our matrices in our playback system, that they're sort of balanced to the different speakers, that we've got all our tools ready to go, ready to work, ready to give us quick balance levels between different systems. I'll often set up a few things so that if I have to drop in cues pretty quickly, I can drop them in and I can play them over, you know, the left-right speakers or whatever, and get a good basic, here's the shape of the sound, here's the timing, here's the elements that are really going to interact with lighting, with actors, with other elements going on, scenery, automation, whatever. And I can get that to work, I can get approval, and then I can floof it up later, right? I can add the other 20 loudspeakers. And then you get into tech dress previews during tech rehearsals, you know, going back and just saying, hey, let's work this, let's get it right, let's make sure that the timing is good, let's make sure that that line that I want to hit on the climax of the sound cue hits at the right time. Sometimes that's stopping the action, letting the actors listen to the sound cue, and then going back and running it, you know, a couple of times if needed. We're going to open the show, and once you're open as a designer, your contract may end at that point, right? You fly out. You're done. Once the show's open, it's really up to the stage manager, your A1, whoever's mixing the show or doing the playback, to make sure that things are continuing to work. You may, if it's running for a long time, there may be checkpoints. So they may hire you as a designer to come back, listen to the show, make sure that it still sounds the way it's supposed to sound, and make adjustments as necessary, just because it's been running for a while and it needs a little checkup. And then as it runs a long time, you may have maintenance issues, you may have, a lot of ongoing things if it's a really long-running show. Those are some of the options, some of the ways that the process of theatrical sound design plays out in the United States.